Welcome back. An 18-year-old swimmer has returned home to a hero's welcome in Tunisia after pulling off one of the most shocking upsets at the Olympics so far. Ahmed Hafnaoui beat heavy favourites to win gold in the men's 400-metre freestyle event, giving his country a welcome distraction from an ongoing political crisis. Michael Holmes has more.
A hero's welcome for a Tunisian swimmer who brought home Olympic gold in a shocking win that surprised his competitors, the sporting world and even himself. 18-year-old Ahmed Hafnaoui was the longest of long shots, the slowest qualifier for the men's 400-metre freestyle, but he outswam the favourites to get the gold, and even more stunning is he did it from the outside lane. I felt shivers when I heard the national anthem, Hafnaoui says, adding, "I'm very honoured." Tunisia's newest media star is a welcome distraction for the country, suffering from a stagnant economy made worse by a surge of coronavirus that's overwhelming hospitals and an escalating political crisis. The nation's president recently dismissed the Prime Minister and suspended Parliament for 30 days. But despite the chaos and uncertainty in government, many Tunisians celebrating Hafnaoui's win as a bright spot during a difficult period. Even one of swimming's greats, Michael Phelps, called the performance an unbelievable swim. Neighbours poured out in the street to greet the newly minted champion. As one man says, seeing him touch that wall first was a win for everyone. When I was watching, I cannot tell you how we felt at this final moment, he says. This is the feeling of every Tunisian. An underdog going from lane 8 to the top of the podium, giving much-needed hope to the country he returns to. Michael Holmes, CNN.
Well, with Tunisia's political future still in doubt, the United States is calling on the country to return to its democratic path and form a new government led by a prime minister who can stabilise the economy and get a grip on the COVID pandemic. Well, President Said declared emergency powers and assumed executive control last week, saying he was acting within the law to save the country after anti-government protests. The critics say recent arrests show his true intentions. Two lawmakers from an Islamist party that opposes the power grab were reportedly detained just a day after an independent lawmaker who accused the president of a coup was arrested. I want to bring in SAFWAN MASRI, Executive Vice President for Global Centers and Global Development at Columbia University. He is also the author of Tunisia, an Arab Anomaly, which examines why Tunisia was the only country to emerge from the Arab Spring as a democracy. Professor Masri, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. Hi, Linda.
I want to ask you, you wrote about this book examining Tunisia as the only country to emerge from the Arab Spring as a democracy. And now, in the past week, we've seen the president sack the prime minister, freeze parliament, dismiss the judiciary. What's at stake here?
Well, I mean, there's a lot that's at stake, Linda. I mean, first and foremost, Tunisia has been on a path towards democratization over the past 10 years. As you've noted, it's the only country to have emerged from the Arab Spring, which actually started in Tunisia. It's the only one to have emerged as a democracy. I mean, we've seen what happened in Libya and Syria and Egypt, which enjoyed democracy for a couple of years, and then there was a military coup in 2013, and so on and so forth. It has not been an easy path, and Tunisia has suffered quite a bit over the past 10 years, both in terms of the democratic experiment potentially unraveling. We saw that in 2013 when civil society intervened to get it out of a political deadlock. During that past 10 years, we've seen a constitution that is unlike any other in this region adopted by the country. We have seen democratic institutions become stronger, multiple elections, both legislative as well as presidential and even municipal, peaceful transitions of power. So all of that is at risk. But at the same time, you've had stubbornness in terms of the economic malaise that was really behind the revolution that brought about the Arab Spring to begin with. That has not been dealt with.
Professor, right now there are no protests in the country. Is that because of the restrictions on gatherings of 3 or more people? Is it because of the curfews? Or is there a lack of resistance? What are your sources on the ground telling you?
So that's I mean, a very, very important question, Linda. What has been going on that's really interesting is that there's overwhelming support for what cannot be described as anything other than a coup carried out by Qais Said. He does not have the constitutional authority to carry on what he did over the past week. But the overwhelming majority of Tunisians are supporting the move, and they are actually, I mean, there is a dichotomy, if you will, between the way that Tunisians and Western media have framed what has been going on, which I think comes in part from each group's experience with democracy. The democracy that Tunisians have experienced over the past decade did include a lot of very complex power sharing arrangements that resulted in stasis and resulted in very legitimate frustrations with the lack of economic progress. This is a country of 11 million people whose economy is in shambles. You have unemployment that is at around 18%, economy that's shrinking. People can't put food on the table. And so they're asking, you know, what has democracy brought us? So they're supporting what the president has done.
Yeah, it certainly sounds that way from interviews I've read with people on the ground. I want to ask you about this New York Times interview with the president, who quoted former French leader Charles de Gaulle saying, "Why do you think that at 67 I would start a career as a dictator?" In that interview, the president claimed that he's going to preserve freedom of speech. Yet days after taking office, or days after claiming power, this power grab, we saw soldiers ransack the Al Jazeera TV offices there, forcing journalists out without warning. What do you think the president's plan is right now?
So, I mean, I think in my mind, there's no question about his authoritarian tendencies. We saw that when he came to power in late 2019, he immediately started working on amending the constitution to make the presidency the center of power in Tunisia. What's ironic is that, I think what he did last week was accomplish unconstitutionally what he could not accomplish constitutionally. His attempts to amend the constitution did not work. He, even as a candidate, was clearly somebody who was going to be very conservative, very stubborn, and intransigent. And as soon as he came to power, he declared his opposition to bringing equality to inheritance to women, his opposition to decriminalizing homosexuality, his support for the death penalty. So I think that he has those very strong authoritarian tendencies. But the more interesting question, I think, to ask about his move is, how is he going to resolve the economic problems for ordinary Tunisians? He is putting at risk what his ousted prime minister has been working on with the IMF, which is a $4 billion debt or loan over 3 years that would have come with a lot of strings attached, including austerity measures, cutting of subsidies, and cutting the employment in the public sector, which is the biggest form of employment in Tunisia. So he has, over the past few days, called on businesses to cut prices. He has called on banks to cut interest rates. How is he going to finance all of this? How is he going to be a man of the people who, at the same time, is going to be forced to cut jobs in the public sector? So my analysis is that he is relying on his authoritarianism being bankrolled by Gulf states who are interested in not seeing democracy thrive in any part of the neighborhood.
Well, we will be watching this closely to see how this plays out. Really great to get your analysis, Professor SAFWAN MASRI. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Bye-bye.
We are going to take a quick break now. We'll be right back. Stay with us.